Israeli officials had threatened to unleash hell on Gaza. This is what that looks and sounds like at Al Ahli Hospital. It's the bodies of 2 young children covered by a single blanket. It's Sana desperately calling on her father to wake up, whilst also clutching her brother's body bag. 16 people, 16 of them killed, sheltering in a school, this woman screams. This sudden and shocking return to bloodshed is too much to bear. The woman next to her has fainted. Inside the emergency room, scenes everyone here had hoped never to witness again. All of them died, this man sobs. Young and old, they were all killed. Mazen walks through the ward alongside his young son.
They bombed our neighbour's house while we were in the tents next to them. My wife was martyred.
Amongst the dead are at least 4 senior Hamas figures and the spokesman of Islamic Jihad. But according to local officials, more than 100 children were also killed. Prime Minister Netanyahu ordered the strikes late last night amidst stalled hostage negotiations. Overseeing them, a new, even more aggressive army chief.
Hamas has rejected 2 concrete mediation proposals presented by the US presidential envoy, Mr. Steve Witkoff, and other mediators. Israel agreed to these mediation proposals. Secondly, Israel has knowledge that Hamas was planning to carry out terrorist attacks against Israel.
But even here in Israel, many believe Netanyahu has long planned on resuming the fighting. From the outset, he's backed away from talks on the second stage of the ceasefire, which would have returned the hostages and ended the war. Instead, he's been attempting to strong-arm Hamas into releasing more hostages, even before beginning further discussions. Yehuda Cohen's son is one of the 24 hostages held in Gaza who's still alive.
From the tattoo.
He recognized his tattoo in the background of a Hamas video of the release of another hostage.
Our government is gambling with the life of the hostages. My government is gambling with the life of my son.
You must be angry.
Of course we're angry. Angry, it's 17 months. I mean, you can't be re-surprised again. So yeah, it's a step back, but we'll never give up.
In the Israeli parliament, relatives of some dead hostages confronted politicians. Far-right Minister Bezalel Smotrich shouts one of them down. "We heard you. Out," he says. Following the airstrikes, another far-right politician, Ben Gvir, has now rejoined Netanyahu's government. Back in Gaza, this is one of the sites targeted today. A school sheltering displaced families. Amongst the debris, pieces of human flesh collected in plastic bags. All that some families will have left to bury. No one knows how far the Israelis intend to go. Is this an attempt to force Hamas to agree to their demands, or the precursor to another ground invasion? In the courtyard of Al Ahli Hospital, they're preparing for funerals. In one quiet corner, a man holds the limp body of his daughter. We have to blur her face for broadcast. But in Gaza, there's no escape from the blood-soaked reality.
Well, here in Tel Aviv, behind me, a large anti-government protest is taking place. It was called after Netanyahu announced plans to sack the head of the Shin Bet intelligence service, a move widely seen as an attempt to further entrench his power. But many of those speaking here, including some very senior former security officials, also oppose this resumption of airstrikes in Gaza and believe that they're primarily motivated by domestic political considerations. We've also heard tonight from recently released hostages also saying that this military action only further endangers the lives of those still being held captive. But instead, Prime Minister Netanyahu, speaking just a short while ago, said that these attacks were just the beginning. For their part, Hamas are yet to respond militarily. I think what's key now is whether President Trump decides to try and rein in the Israeli government here or continues to apparently support further attacks.
Sakanda Kamani in Tel Aviv. Well, earlier I spoke to the United Nations Special Rapporteur for the occupied Palestinian territories, Francesca Albanese, for the Forecast podcast. And I began by asking her reaction to Israel's latest assault.
First of all, it's not that Israel broke the ceasefire last night. Israel has just killed around 400 people. And this is the acceleration of not a war, of the genocide that is happening in real time. And it has been happening for the past 16 months. And as we speak, Israel has ordered the evacuation of the Palestinians in Gaza from the north or from the south, which means that the aggression is going to continue. This is a military strategy aiming to ethnically cleanse what remains of Palestine. And if the Palestinians do not move voluntarily, this is what waits for them.
I just want to put to you what Israel's explanation is. They say they are...
But I don't need to hear what Israel says. Can we center the discussion on international law?
So I want to ask you precisely about the legality of what is going on now, because Israel says it is targeting Hamas terrorists. And it says that anybody else killed is a regrettable byproduct of war. Now, what is the legality of what they are doing if they are indeed targeting people they regard as Hamas?
Let's assume that it's a conflict, right? In a conflict, there are rules. And there are principle of military necessity that Israel claims to have. Well, it is to provide evidence. It is to take precautions. It is to respect the principle of proportionality in every action it takes. How it's possible that in 16 months it has killed 50,000 people and leveled to the ground the entire Gaza Strip? Very little remains, not enough to resume life. There are rules to spare life, to preserve the sanctity of life. And there are obligations. Look, again, this is not debatable. I mean, my intention is not to debate whether it's genocide or not. This is past. We have failed to prevent genocide. And it's not just me saying that. The entire human rights community, there is a wall-to-wall consensus that Israel is committing genocide. Look, I take it that is very sensitive for politicians to deal with it. But there are two Israeli leaders who are wanted for war crimes and crimes against humanity, including starvation. So even if we don't go to genocide analysis, why member states like the UK have not honored their international obligations to intervene and stop crimes, including because in January 2024, the International Court of Justice, 3 months into this military assault, had concluded that there was a plausibility of risk of genocide.
Was October the 7th, the attack, an act of genocide? Or did it have genocidal intent?
I don't think so, but it was war crimes were committed against Israelis. There is no doubt about that.
So what's the difference?
The difference is the intent to destroy a people as such.
Is that not clearly what they were trying to do on October the 7th?
So
weren't they just killing anybody they saw?
I don't think it was an act of genocide. It was despicable, it was inhumane, it was criminal to the extent it hit civilians, and it has been also documented by the Commission of Inquiry who has investigated what has happened inside Israel. And I'm not going to question that. I've condemned the killing of Israeli civilians from the very first moment, and so the abduction of civilians. But whatever, the reason why I'm saying that is that since the very first hours, there have been people in Israel saying, oh, we have been victims of a genocide, which has been used to portray the Palestinians as an existential threat for what they had allegedly supported happening on October 7, and therefore justifying the brutal, revengeful response that had happened. But this is the beauty of international law, that the Genocide Convention says whatever the reason, whatever self-defense, even self-defense doesn't justify a genocide.
You're the subject of threats. Do you feel, A, it's worth it, and B, you're achieving anything right now?
I don't know. Worth is not the first word that comes to my mind.
Well, your personal security is in jeopardy right now, isn't it?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'm asking myself. I have 2 young children, so my answer is no one in my life is more important than anyone else, including you, Krishnan. So if you were in Gaza with your family being exterminated, you would be very happy to have someone like me taking risk, because you would be seen, at least. So worth is not exactly the word that comes to mind. It's a moral imperative. It's a moral call. And at the same time, when I have the opportunity, I can sleep with a clear, light conscience. I wonder how leaders, including in this country, look at their children these days, have their meals, buy their things on Amazon or whatever. How can you carry out your life thinking that you have the power to stop it, and you're not doing that?
Francesca Albanese, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me.